Hello to our viewers watching on Dine Sports, and welcome to our breakdown of UFC 303, Pereira versus Prochazka 2. This International Fight Week coming to you live from Las Vegas this weekend with a very stacked card, one must say. Obviously, this card was previously set to be headlined by Conor McGregor, making his return. And instead, on just 3 weeks' notice, we get this epic title rematch at light heavyweight at the top of the card. Can't be too mad about that. As always, I'm joined by Nick to break down the fights. How are you feeling about UFC 303?
Yeah, man. Obviously, I mean, there's some disappointment that the Conor fight didn't happen, but I think they did a good job kind of filling out the card otherwise to make up for it. We see a lot of Conor cards since he can sell a pay-per-view, he can sell a seat so easily. We could go back to the Cowboy card where he headlined, which was the last time I think we saw him. Or no, he fought. That was his last win. It doesn't matter. But like these are like shallow cards. So to have this on a pay-per-view that was supposed to have Conor, I mean, top to bottom, there's a lot of interesting prospects and really competitive matchups. Some probably sharp underdogs and a lot of good value all over the place. So coming off a few kind of, I don't know, annoying weeks from where I sit, definitely happy to get into a nice pay-per-view here with a lot of name value.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this card. Um, we'll start at the very top, concluding the main card, the light heavyweight title fight. Alex Pereira looking to defend his belt here against Jiri Prochazka. Pereira won against Prochazka not long ago at UFC 300. Here, Alex Pereira
Just
is
300.
no, not 300. Just recently fighting, defending his belt against Jamal Hill at UFC 300. Alex Pereira is back in action already here, looking to make another title defense. Clearly a company man stepping up on such short notice here, putting his belt on the line. It must be said, Pereira did admit to entering that Jamal Hill fight with some issues regarding his foot and toe, only made worse in that bout. Could be fighting on, one good foot, zero good feet, one would say. But these guys are always going into fights with some nagging injuries and the sort that they need to work to resolve. Pereira the slight favorite in this matchup, I think for good reason. I mean, we've seen what he's able to do here at light heavyweight. It's very difficult to close the distance on Pereira. He's a very effective kickboxer. He's going to chop away at the legs of his opponents. And as they try and move in, Pereira has some of the best counters we've seen, certainly at this level in the light heavyweight division. A guy like Prochazka, as we saw in their first matchup, extremely competitive. Some would argue a early stoppage as Pereira was rocked, or Prochazka was rocked and finished with Pereira in mount on top of him a bit prematurely. But we've seen Jiri fight through adversity in fights before, get rocked badly, and continue to move forward, continue to fight. So really can't count him out of this matchup, and I'm glad that we get to see this fight run back. I think, Jiri in this fight, he's going to have more to draw from, having previously shared the cage with Pereira, having felt his power. Again, Prochazka was doing very good in that fight, but again, fighting with your hands down against a guy like this with so much power, it's going to put you in a very tough spot defensively. Prochazka's always going to move forward and take risks. I think that's going to be exemplified here with both these guys taking a short notice fight scheduled for 5 rounds. But yeah, getting dog money on Prochazka, I think certainly it would not surprise me to see him get his hand raised here. I will be picking him here in this light heavyweight rematch. I have some pause with all the hype surrounding Pereira and again, the injuries that he's been dealing with if he is entering this fight at 100%. We saw him just recently across the world in Australia, doing a bit of promotion after his recent title victory. So, no, I'm not at all questioning whether his head's in it or not. I just think Prochazka is on the cusp of a title, one of the best athletes there is in the 205-pound division. And yeah, I think he has a slight edge here against Pereira. He's going to be landing the more spastic attacks. And, we've seen he has the power to match that of Pereira. We've seen Pereira's lights turned out. I think Jiri wins this time, setting up for an epic trilogy bout down the line.
Yeah, I am with you. I do kind of side with Jiri. I will admit I'm very biased. This guy's been my favorite light heavyweight pretty much since he made his debut. But yeah, I mean, on paper, it's tough to argue with Pereira being the favorite. I mean, he has a tremendous leg kicking game. We saw in Jiri's recent fight against Rakic, that's not really something he's learned to defend. More, he just eats them and continues to eat them. He can switch stances, which does kind of mitigate some of that damage. But at the same time, I mean, against a guy like Pereira who does throw that kick so well, I mean, that could cause an early night for him if, again, he doesn't learn to defend that a little bit. But the reason I think I'm on Prochazka here, other than just the price, is partially that first fight. I do think he was winning more minutes than not. He did secure one takedown, looked good on the feet, was doing a good job moving in and out of range with Pereira. And then the one time he decided to stand and trade, he did get caught. And yeah, it's not like his lights were completely turned out either. I'm not too upset by the stoppage. I think it made some sense. Jiri himself said he kind of thought it was an okay stoppage in the moment. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely a difference in what we see from like Volkanovski coming off a KO where he's iced on the ground for several minutes, or Jiri who's just kind of like, damn, what just happened? He's already awake as the fight is getting called. So I don't know. I don't want to put too much into that KO. I will say these are massive guys. Both have a ton of power. This is a super volatile matchup. If you're talking to anyone who's super confident on either side, it really kind of badger them. I don't know, play devil's advocate and kind of boost up the other, because this is one of those fights that if it took place 10 times could go 5 one way, 5 the other. For me, again, I'm leaning Jiri, not so much for technical reasons. I do think he could have a grappling advantage here, but a lot of the intangibles, going back to Pereira's trilogy with Adesanya, he had to climb the ladder, got that title shot, won the belt. And then when they rematched, we did see Izzy get the best of him. Pereira, like you said, he was down in Australia training with Tai Tuivasa, doing a lot of press and media stuff, just having a good time as he deserved after that UFC 300 performance. But Prochazka, I mean, he really does live this stuff. He was fully trained, preparing for his next fight, whether it be against Pereira or someone else. Seems to be 100% healthy, super focused. And I mean, it's kind of like, you look at just one of Jiri's fights, like he gets knocked down, he gets up, he finds a way to win. Like if you zoom out and kind of look at this matchup, I mean, he got knocked down the first time. I'm kind of feeling like this time he's going to get the best of Pereira. And yes, Pereira taking this fight on short notice, probably got a ton of money to be here. And yeah, like you said, I mean, this sets up a trilogy. This is arguably one of the best fights you could make in the UFC right now. Any division, any level. The first time he got announced, I was calling it real life Mortal Kombat. These guys are absolute characters. Like this is what the sport was built on, just these different styles, different cultures, and just totally different guys, but just total respect of each other. Both absolute killers. Two of my favorites on the roster right now. But yeah, I am siding with Jiri. I just think there's a little bit of value there. I will look to over-unders. I can't imagine this goes the distance, but it wouldn't shock me to see Jiri a little bit more reserved this time around, but that's really not his style. Again, Pereira, the better technical striker. I think this fight does mostly take place on the feet. He has that deft touch with the left hook, so I'm not going to be surprised if he wins again. But I do think the intangibles do favor Jiri here, and I think the UFC is happy to kind of give him a little bit of an advantage, albeit not a huge one, just knowing that they could set up a trilogy and it's going to sell as well as pretty much anything other than a Conor fight. So I'm on Jiri here. Am I confident? Not really, but super, super excited for this fight. Again, one of the best that they can make right now.
I would certainly look to the under in this spot as well. I think Pereira's style sort of lends to it. He gets right after it, slowly, engaging with his opponents, and I think that'll force action back from Jiri. Again, the short notice nature of this fight as well. I think both may prefer to get after it rather than look to do a hard 25 minutes. Just lastly, touching on this fight, do you think either guy will have more in terms of his supernatural spirits compared to the other?
I mean, it is funny that Jiri brought that up and people are like, what is he talking about? And then Pereira's like, yes, I do have spirits. I don't know, man. I did just catch some of the press conference before we went live. We're recording this Thursday evening. I heard Jiri just say, I don't want to talk about this anymore. He's like, I'm upset I even brought it up. No one's cheating. There's no advantage. It's not a big deal. We're just going to fight. But I don't know, man. I think definitely both buy into this stuff. And I mean, to be a cage fighter at that level, you kind of have to be a little crazy. Do I think there's an advantage either way? Not necessarily, but definitely looking forward to it. And that's part of what makes this matchup so fun.
Yeah, such a good clash that we will see headlining this event. Co-main event also kind of made out of nowhere with the news of Conor McGregor pulling out. Diego Lopes, the -140 favorite here against Brian Ortega at featherweight. This obviously has some pretty significant implications here at the top of the featherweight division. Lopes is on a very impressive streak of 3 wins. all in a minute and a half. He's gone in there, completely dismantled Gavin Tucker with his excellent jiu-jitsu, and then pounding out both Pat Sabatini and Sadiq Youssef in his previous two performances. These are top 15 featherweights, and Lopes has gotten out of there quickly. I think he has slightly better striking in terms of like his power and the arsenal attacks we often see compared to that of a guy like Ortega, who does a lot of good work when it comes to just like boxing and finding kicks as they're available. Ortega is better out of both stances than Lopes, but he's so quick to the action. Lopes in each of these previous fights just putting himself in the fire quickly and engaging with his opponents. I think that could be a recipe for success against a guy like Ortega, who's not always the fastest starter, but it also could certainly play to his detriment if we see around 2 or around 3 here. Ortega relying on his more veteran experience and able to grind out Lopes in the latter half. It's going to be interesting when these two engage on the mat. Lopes obviously lethal with his offensive jiu-jitsu. The same could be said for Brian Ortega. It'll be interesting to see which one gets put in a bad position first and, how they're able to respond to the other's excellent offensive jiu-jitsu. So I'm really torn in this spot. Getting plus money on the Brian Ortega side is very tempting. And yeah, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure which way my money may land come Saturday, but right now I'm thinking Lopes, kind of riding this hot streak that he has been on. Ortega in his last fight looking impressive, battling from adversity against Yair Rodriguez, but that's a very different stylistic matchup than this one. Rodriguez obviously super lethal on the feet, but really doesn't have the ground game to compare to someone like Ortega or someone like Diego Lopes. And yeah, if this young kid's going to give Ortega exactly what he's getting on the mat, I think he should have the edge here, albeit slightly over Ortega.
Yeah, this is a tough one, man. I totally agree that I'm not entirely decided. I totally agree that they're really interesting stylistically, the way these two match up. Two of the best jiu-jitsu players in the division, obviously. Ortega, kind of more of the tenured vet now, which is funny because I remember when he was the up-and-comer. And yeah, Lopes just absolutely on a tear. That win over Sadiq Youssef at UFC 300 only propelled his stock even further. And now he's getting an opportunity like this where he could potentially align himself for a title shot or a title eliminator matchup right after this. On paper, I mean, it's tough not to go with Ortega at plus money, just knowing the type of competition he's been facing. We look at the stats. I mean, it shows that he's absorbing more than 6 significant strikes per minute. Most of that is just the Max Holloway fight, though. He did come back and look really good striking against Chang Sung-jung, Korean Zombie, when he did make that return. And I think that's more of the Brian Ortega we're going to see here and moving forward. I think on the feet, when it comes to boxing, he is technically sound. He has come a long way, but Lopes is explosive. I mean, he has the power. There's stories coming out of his camp that he's knocking out sparring partners on the feet, known as a grappler, but really just dangerous striking. And he showed that against Sadiq Youssef, a guy who's a primary striker, really setting up that nice uppercut to find that finish in that spot there. So this one's tough. And what makes it even more difficult is that I think whichever way you go, if you're wrong, you're going to look kind of dumb. So if you go with Lopes, he's probably going to get it done quick if he gets it done. Probably finds that finish in the first round. I think his athleticism, speed can probably overwhelm Ortega on the feet. We did see Ortega really kind of struggle to get going against Yair. That has been an issue for him throughout his career. You could go back to the Volkanovski fight, a few other spots for him as well. It just takes him a little while to get going. Against someone like Lopes, that could be dangerous. At the same time, if his durability holds up the same way we've seen it hold up as recently as that Yair fight 3 or so months ago, then he could take over late here. I mean, Lopes does seem to have decent cardio, but we haven't seen him extended consistently at this level. I mean, he's continuing to take on tougher and tougher competition. Ortega by far his toughest opponent. And yeah, I mean, he looked good against Evloev, but he was wrestled relatively easily against Joe Anderson Brito when he was on Contender Series. He was kind of manhandled a little bit. And while I think Lopes might just be the better jiu-jitsu player in terms of like pure dynamic finishing ability, I think Ortega might be the slightly better wrestler. And I don't even know if that's going to matter here necessarily. I would be very excited and intrigued to see what this fight looks like if it hits the mat. I just think whoever's on top obviously is going to have the big advantage there. Lopes likes to chase submissions from his back against Ortega. That could set him up for something where he could be in a position he doesn't want to be in. But I think more likely than not, as we often see when it's two grapplers, mostly a fight that's going to take place on the feet. And like I said, I give Lopes a major power advantage, but if he can't find that finish early, then yeah, I mean, he's going to be playing right into Ortega's strengths, which is durability, cardio, and yeah, he just seems to build as his fights wear on. That's always been the story of Brian Ortega. So yeah, man, I'm torn here. Can't make a full proper decision. If it was a 1 round fight, I'd say Diego Lopes should be like -400. If it was a 5 round fight, I'd probably take Ortega with some confidence. But here we have 3 rounds, close to pick 'em. Going to spend a little bit more time on this one, but certainly worthy of it. Just an excellent matchup.
Yeah, it should be a very good one. We will look now at the light heavyweight featured bout between Roman Dolidze, a -140 favorite, facing Anthony Smith, +120. The underdog, Anthony Smith, at UFC 301. You may have enjoyed our breakdown of that event. I think both of us sat here and said we would not be surprised to see Smith pull it off as a big betting underdog, and neither of us took him in that spot nonetheless. Really a vintage performance from Smith, catching that guillotine 2 minutes into the fight against Vitor Petrino on a bad takedown attempt. I think Smith in this fight, I really like. I hope it's not just bias off of the recent performance, but Smith here facing Roman Dolidze, a rather short notice booking at light heavyweight. Dolidze fighting most of his bouts at middleweight lately, and certainly undersized compared to Anthony Smith. Dolidze made both of his debut fights in the UFC at light heavyweight and looked good at 205 pounds. But I really can't rate highly those performances against Khadis Ibrahimov and John Alon. The more recent showings from Dolidze going to decision with Vettori, pounding out Jack Hermanson in that weird position on the mat. I really think Smith is going to have a lot of his best work here on the feet against Dolidze, using his length and an excellent jab to keep distance against this dangerous power puncher. But Dolidze's offensive striking really isn't too concerning for me. The guy certainly has knockout power, but I mean, we saw him starch Phil Hawes after tearing up his knee. But it's not necessarily the highest level striking. And a guy with all this MMA experience, such as Anthony Smith, is going to land the better knees, put together the better jabs, land better counters as these two are exchanging on the feet. And yeah, I although recognize Dolidze as a very dangerous and capable jiu-jitsu practitioner, I think Smith's better. I think we've seen Smith utilize it more in an MMA cage. And yeah, I think if this fight hits the mat, he's just as live in this spot to catch another submission as was the case in his last fight. Oftentimes, Anthony Smith, you'll see him end fights early, first round finishes one way or the other. Not always the case. I feel like in this spot, although he is, a bit more of a veteran compared to Dolidze, he has a lot more tear on his 35-year-old body than Dolidze does. As this gets into round 2 and round 3, I think it would sway into Dolidze's favor. But I like Smith as the underdog here, and I think he's going to be able to get it done early, whether it be with his hands or catching a quick sub.
Yeah, this is another one where I feel like if you're wrong, you're going to look stupid, but it's actually kind of a tough fight to call. My maybe worst pick of the year, probably my worst pick of the year, was going with Dolidze over Imavov that fight. Dolidze did not look like he belonged in the cage with Nasruddin Imavov, who has made major strides over his last few fights. But I just had such a poor read on that fight that I'm just like kind of gun shy either direction now with Dolidze. I was never high on him, faded him a lot coming into the UFC against the likes of Hawes, Dawkins, etc. To my dismay. Was pretty heavy on Vettori against him, a fight that he almost pulled off. But yeah, it's just two fighters here are super inconsistent in my opinion. I mean, obviously Smith looks amazing catching that choke on Petrino, but we really didn't have to see him test in that spot. Then against Khalil Roundtree, I mean, he gets absolutely steamrolled. He has a pretty good fight against Ryan Spawn, where he kind of grinds out a decision. And then against Johnny Walker, he looked absolutely terrible. You just don't know what version you're getting of Anthony Smith. You don't know what version you're getting of Roman Dolidze. And with this fight being a new matchup on short notice, Dolidze coming up a weight class, Smith actually kind of small for a 205. I'm just like, I don't know, man. My head's spinning here. I think in like pure grappling, I might favor Dolidze just because, I don't know, he's a little more progressive in what he does. Smith really has the fundamentals down when it comes to BJJ, but we saw in that Hermanson fight, like, I don't even know what to call that. Back crucifix punch, whatever, man. Like Smith isn't really pulling those things out of his back pocket.
Mounted calf slicer.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So like I do think this fight mostly takes place on the feet, where Smith is the better technical striker, but he definitely has the worst chin. Dolidze's never been KO'd. And Dolidze definitely has a power advantage, even though he doesn't really do a good job setting those shots up. So Dolidze has moved to Extreme Couture, which I think is good for him. He's in the rooms with the likes of the Curtises, Stricklands, Kyle Borello, etc. Just guys who are going to help him improve his striking. But at the same time, I mean, I can't put money on a guy as a favorite who's so damn inconsistent. So I do agree that the value's on Smith. I'm going to spend a little bit more time kind of digging into intangibles. I know Dolidze just had a baby. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes that's a bad thing. But I will look into how his camp's been going, if he's getting normal sleep, things like that. But another really tough fight to call, when I could certainly see going either way. And I mean, it could go dominant either way. So tough for me to have a sharp stand here. But I do agree with you that the value right now is probably on Smith, especially with Dolidze moving back up to 205.
All right, we will move on now to this women's bantamweight matchup between Mayra Bueno Silva and Macy Chiasson. Interesting, some line movement both directions in this fight. Currently sitting dead even pick'em. I'm curious your thoughts on this exciting matchup.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of seems to be a theme building here, but another matchup between two pretty inconsistent fighters. I mean, when Bueno Silva looks good, she looks really good. You can say the same for Macy Chiasson, and then when they look bad, they look terrible. But yeah, I mean, I think at her best, Bueno Silva's the more dangerous fighter here. Potent finisher, doesn't really carry a ton of power on the feet, but puts out ridiculous volume. Really good on the mat, doesn't really have the wrestling to take her fights there. But once they get there, I mean, she has tremendous jiu-jitsu. I mean, we go back to the Stephanie Egger fight. I mean, she choked out Holly Holm on the feet, albeit on Adderall. Not that that matters necessarily. And then Chiasson, I mean, she's big for 135. Spent a lot of time fighting up at featherweight when that was still a division. Just a great clinch striker, which kind of plays into some of Bueno Silva's weaknesses here. So yeah, this is just another fight I'm going to spend a little more time on. I wish I had more like convicted takes with some of this stuff, but yeah, I mean, if it's on the mat, I do favor Bueno Silva. If it's at striking range, I think Silva's going to match her on volume, but Chiasson probably lands the bigger shots. So just another fight I could see going either way. Chiasson does have a little bit of a reach advantage here. Safe Sayud in her corner, screaming at her the whole fight, I do think is actually an advantage for a fighter like her, who does seem to respond to her coaches fairly well. And, you know, I've been pretty high on Bueno Silva. I picked her in some tough spots. I did fade her in that title fight. But yeah, I mean, I did not think she'd look as bad as she did there. It was completely faded. There is rumors that she like blew out an eardrum that day or during the fight or something, and that affected her performance. But yeah, I think at her best, if they both come in at their best, I think Bueno Silva's the side. Just Bueno Silva's been so inconsistent that I'm not super confident in backing her here, especially if she does turn out to be the favorite. This line is flip-flopped all week. Seems like the betting public's kind of with me, and this is another fight that's really tough to just pick a side on.
I think it is. I think my pick is going to be Bueno Silva, though. I lean her here in a 3-round atmosphere. And yeah, it seems a bit discounted coming off that awful title performance. That though 5-round fight, this 3-round fight, I think she does fare better in this sort of spot. Chiasson as well, you know, recent wins over Penny Kianzad, okay. But a lot of what we've seen from her lately is effective offensive wrestling, assisting in, you know, getting these nods at decision and, you know, winning those in-between moments of the fights. That's not going to be an option for her here against Bueno Silva, who I think is the much better grappler. You know, Bueno Silva also not always one to pursue a heavy takedown game plan, but Chiasson is just 46% takedown defense in the UFC. I think it is very decisive when this fight hits the mat. It is going to be Bueno Silva, and I'm not sure Chiasson's going to be able to, you know, defend for very long when it comes to the, you know, offensive submission attempts from Bueno Silva. We saw, you know, Pennington able to get Chiasson out of there in 8 minutes with her offensive grappling, and yeah, it certainly wasn't evidence in that title fight, but Bueno Silva's offensive grappling should be rated higher, even higher than that. So, and then, as always, Bueno Silva, a dog, someone who's going to give it her all on the feet, and someone who I think can certainly feel comfortable standing there a while with Chiasson. So I'm going to go that way, hoping that she could get this fight to the mat and win decisively in that manner. But this fight, to open the main card at 10 p.m. is a good one. A striker's delight between Ian Machado Gary and Michael Venom Page. Ian Gary the -155, favorite at current, steaming in that direction. taking money thus far in the week. I think this is probably the number I would play Ian Gary, but if this line continues to balloon, I'm not going to feel comfortable doing so. I think Michael Page is the real deal, and he's going to beat a lot of top 10 welterweights. But I think Ian Gary's kind of the real deal too. This kid's got very slick striking. He puts forth very high volume, especially late rounds 2, round 3. You see, that's where Gary sometimes is even at his best. He's found his distance at that point. He's able to really unload on his combinations. It's going to be interesting to see how he is able to get in on Michael Venom Page in this spot. Page, obviously, super technical karate practitioner. Significant reach advantage over Ian Gary, at least in terms of what is listed, and effective from both stances. Page is going to do what he does best: dance around the ring, stay out of the way of Gary's offensive attacks and land big counters that he's on the return. I think that could play a key factor here. As Page is moving in and landing counters, if Gary could just be a step quicker, I think he is. He's even going to be able to duck out of the way of some of those big power shots from Page and, string together 2-3 punch counters of his own. Just touching him slightly over the course of these 15 minutes and putting forth the better work, I think is going to lead to a Ian Gary win. But I also don't mind having my money on this kid because I think there's other ways that he could win this fight. Gary, confident in his grappling. We haven't really seen it put on the highest of display, but I think against a pure striker like Venom Page, he certainly could take this fight to the mat. And then Gary as well, somebody we've seen rocked before, albeit by a southpaw, but not finished. Page, somebody that, has obviously gotten put out in previous fight. I think Gary has the power to do so if he's able to connect. I just do not think it's going to be easy for him to close the distance on such an elusive striker. But, in a matchup like this, I think Gary continuing to rise, still on the right side of 30 years old. Page, I would love to see him go on a run here at welterweight. I can't tell you enough, but I'm feeling Gary's going to be able to get the win in the spot. Just being a step quicker and putting forth the better volume over 15 minutes gives him that edge for me.
Yeah, man, this was tough for me. It's tough to really look at either of these guys' resumes or the film and find similar matchups. Like, obviously, Gary's hasn't faced anyone like MVP, but on the other end, I don't know that MVP's really faced anyone like Gary. The biggest reason I'm not just on MVP here, because I do think he's going to have technical advantages at range and on the feet, is the age difference. I mean, we're talking about a 10 to 11 year age gap. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I just know historically that does not usually favor the veteran fighter. Obviously, Page's style and his general inactivity earlier in his career, he's not as banged up as some other guys at 37. But yeah, man, I mean, Gary is the up and comer. This was supposed to be a McGregor card. They did want them probably to both win on that same night and really help to build into that Irish market. Grab a lot of those Connor fans, put them on Ian Gary. At least that's what the UFC wants. But I mean, we do see, like, time and time again, the UFC doesn't always get what it wants. And I mean, with a guy like Ian Gary, I don't know that it's a bad thing for him to maybe have a loss soon at some point in his career. It's not like this kid's going to stay undefeated forever. Soon he's going to be fighting the Shavkats of the world. I mean, yeah, man, this fight's just super interesting to me stylistically because I picked Holland against MVP, another pick I'm not super proud of. But I thought Holland's speed would kind of be able to allow him to close the distance. I thought he had a power advantage there, but he got frustrated quick. And I do think Gary's kind of more headstrong than Kevin Holland, especially at this point in Holland's career where he's just kind of collecting checks. But yeah, man, I could see something similar happening here. And as excited as I am for this fight, who's going to be surprised if it's a snoozer and one guy outstrikes the other 50-40? And I don't know, like that Jeff Neal fight had its moments, but it really wasn't all that exciting. I mean, Gary, at his best, he's kind of winning a point fighting style. You could almost say the same thing about MVP when he's not chasing highlight reel stuff, which I don't think he'll be able to do here. So I'm hoping this is a super fun matchup. I'm hoping that they strike at range. They both have their moments, and it's just a really fun 15 minutes. But I don't know, man. Like, if I'm picking a fight on this card to go 15 and have the lowest volume, it's definitely this one. Like, both these guys are just so cerebral in their defense that it almost hurts the fan experience in a weird way. I'm a little bit surprised they're making this too. I know they're not paying Page a ton, but he is someone they're trying to promote. Gary, obviously, an up and comer they're trying to promote. It's just interesting. So I think the UFC wants Gary to win here. I think if he grapples, he's going to easily cover that minus 150 price. I think he can look up to minus 200. But this kid, we know about him. He's got a big head. He wants to stand and strike here. Just watching the presser, he's talking about how everyone says Michael Page is this great striker. I'm going to show I'm better. So if he's a legend, I'm already a legend. Blah, blah, blah. My terrible Irish accent aside, I mean, I'm very interested to see how this fight plays out. I do think there's value on MVP right now as the underdog, just knowing his style is nothing like Gary's ever seen. Not something Gary, even at shoot a box, is going to be able to replicate in the gym. So yeah, it's interesting, but I will say Gary has youth on his side, has durability on his side, has momentum on his side. But in terms of technical striking at range in the big cage, I do think Michael Page should be able to look good for minutes on end here. So it's an interesting one. Another one I'm going to spend a little bit more time on. Don't fault you at all for picking Gary as the 10-year younger fighter on what was supposed to be a McGregor card. But I do think stylistically Page is kind of a tough puzzle to solve. So definitely looking forward to this one, but don't be shocked if it's kind of a low volume affair and ends up a split decision where someone's pissed off.
Well, should be a yeah, a good way to start the main card, no matter what we get there. The prelims begin at 8 p.m., close with a middleweight fight between Joe Pyfer and Marc-Andre Barriault. Pyfer the minus 320 favorite in the spot against Barriault. Pyfer I did fade as a sizable favorite in his last fight. His first 5-round main event facing Jack Hermanson. He looked really good at the end of that fight. Lit up Hermanson, got his hands going early, and then absolutely was toast from there on out, losing the 4 rounds that followed. Pyfer, I think the wins really aren't high quality against Abdul Razak Al Hassan, against, Gerald Mearshart, Alan Amidovsky. But what we've seen out of him, obviously explosive guy, quick with his hands, and effective when fights hit the mat. He's able to take opponents down, it seems, with relative ease. Looks big for a middleweight, and I think he is going to have a visible size advantage here facing Marc-Andre Barriault. It is just going to be a matter of if this fight looks similar to that last performance against Hermanson, and Barriault is able to string Pyfer into the latter stages of round 2 and round 3. Barriault's known for his gas tank, for the ability to fight hard and stay in your face for a good 15 minutes. But he's also someone who's seen touched on the chin before and not necessarily respond the best. I think that's a lot of the reason why Pyfer is a sizable favorite here. Decisive advantage in terms of one-punch power. If he's moving forward early, confident, able to prevent Barriault from backing him into the cage, I think Pyfer really should be able to let his hands go here and find success. And then again, the offensive wrestling. It's not like Barriault is very good in terms of his grappling as a whole. If Pyfer were to elect to go that route, I think he'd have a slight edge here. So aside from fading, I think we should see Pyfer, get the job done here, probably in the early half of this fight.
Yeah, I'm with you. I do think it's a spot for Pyfer. I think there's even more reasons than you gave, though. I think the grappling advantage is kind of massive here. Pyfer obviously trains out of that camp in Philly with the likes of Sean Brady. I know Nursultan, Rude Zaboyev just moved over there, but they're really good at grappling over there. And I think against Hermanson, he didn't really want to mess with him on the mat, understandably so. The other things we have to remember, if that was a 3-round fight, Pyfer won the first 2 rounds. He's going to win that on all 3 scorecards. And listening to interviews this week, Pyfer got with the UFC PI, and they were telling him that he wasn't eating enough carbs. This guy works out every day. He's running miles. He's doing everything right in the gym, but he's not really refueling his body the right way, which could have played into why his cardio hasn't been excellent, even though he's running all the miles like he says he is. And yeah, I mean, Barriault, the thing about him is he's going to come forward and he's super hittable. So it's the type of guy that you kind of give to a power puncher if you're looking to kind of get them right. Barriault does land more than 6 significant strikes per minute. He also absorbs nearly 6 significant strikes per minute. Pyfer obviously kind of picks his shots, but I think this does play to his advantages here. He's going to be longer. I mean, these guys are similar height, but Pyfer is really wide reach. Don't know what it's listed at, but I'm sure when we see them face off, it'll be pretty clear. And yeah, kind of similar to Gary, if he does choose to grapple, I think he could look like an even bigger favorite. Again, this was a McGregor card. The UFC had a lot of kind of interest in building prospects on this card. They're more business minded on these McGregor cards than honestly any other card because they know they're getting a lot of casual eyes they don't normally get. So they want to build up someone like Joe Pyfer, maybe Ian Gary, Payton Talbott, who we'll talk about in a little bit. This is that spot for Pyfer, in my opinion. They want to get him right. They gave him that Hermanson fight to beat Hermanson. But yeah, the cardio just wasn't there. But again, that's 3 rounds. He probably gets the win there. So I think Pyfer gets back in the win column here. A little bit insane, not the highest fight IQ. Barriault is kind of a seasoned vet, so I don't want to overinvest, but it does feel like a spot they're setting up Pyfer to get back in the win column.
All right, with you on that one. We'll look next at a featherweight matchup between Andrei Fili and Cub Swanson. Fili the minus 245 favorite in the spot, with Swanson now being offered at 2-1 odds. I'm interested in betting Swanson if I'm going to get a price like 2-1. I took Swanson in his last fight, and he was able to pull off the upset facing Hakeem Dawodu. I think this is going to be a matchup where, again, if we're spending prolonged periods of time on the feet, Swanson's going to be able to find sustained success. Now, whether that means he get his hand raised will be dependent on what happens on the in-between, whether that's Andrei Fili successfully landing takedowns and, putting Swanson's butt on the mat where he's able to score points, or if Fili is able to connect with power of his own before that. Fili has very good hands, very tight boxing. He certainly would be, able to oblige Swanson for 15 minutes standing and exchanging on the feet. He's chinny though too. Although Swanson doesn't really have exceptional punching power, I don't think Fili is going to want to, have that exact affair. Instead, mixing in those takedowns. So it will be dependent on Swanson's ability to defend those shots, get back to his feet, and land effective offense from there. At 40 years old, I'm really not going to rush to the window and bet him in this spot, but I certainly see path to victory for him. And Fili's never someone who I'm really, all over when it comes to his fights. I give him a pass for getting knocked out by Dan Ige in his most recent performance. Nothing to be said about there. But nonetheless, not the most dynamic in terms of his offensive abilities. And, I think Swanson certainly holds his own if this does end up going a full 3 rounds. So interested in him, 2-1 underdog. Not exactly sure if I'll be pulling the trigger, but 2-1 or, perhaps even better by the time this fight goes off.
Yeah, man, this is a tough one. I do think Fili's the rightful favorite, but I really don't agree with the price. But let's play a little game here. And bear with me for a second. So, looking at Fili's most recent fights, lost to Anderson Brito, win over Bill Algeo, lost to Nathaniel Wood, win over Lucas Almeida, lost to Dan Ige, matchup here with Cub Swanson. Then you go over to Cub Swanson and see what he's been doing recently. And just scrolling down, we got the nice win over Daniel Pineda, lost to Giga, win over Elkins, lost to Martinez, win over Duadu. Now the matchup here with Fili. We got 2 patterns colliding here, man. And if it's any indication, Fili should get the win here to keep these streaks going of these guys alternating wins and losses over their past few fights. I just thought that was kind of
that
funny.
always works in roulette. So in fights, it should work too.
Lock it in, bet your mortgage. But yeah, man. I mean, all that nonsense aside, it's interesting. I mean, these are 2 guys who are really similar. Cubs definitely had the better career. I mean, you got to go back years, but he has wins over the likes of Dustin Poirier, Charles Oliveira. He was with WEC before the UFC bought them, like championship level fighter, ranked in the division for years. Just super, super credentialed. Then you have a guy like Fili, who kind of looks like him. I mean, totally tatted up, pretty similar style on the feet. But yeah, he's got that wrestling training out of Team Alpha Male, and I think that could be the difference for him here. It's just going to be a matter of, with the crowd cheering in front of a legend, are you going to lean on the wrestling? And if you are, I do think you're the rightful favorite. Being Andrei Fili, I think you probably get it done. But if you're just going to stand and trade for 15 minutes, man, I think the line's way off, and Swanson could easily make this a fight in which he looks like the favorite. I mean, it's pretty much a coin flip for me on the feet. Both these guys, not the best durability, not the most power in their punches, but I think they both have enough to maybe finish the other. But yeah, Swanson getting up there in age. It's not like Fili's some super young prospect either, but Yeah, man, just a really fun fight. I mean, if there was like an underdog bet for like fight of the night, I could see this being it, and that is under the assumption that Fili's going to just decide to stand and trade for the most part. He does average more than 2 takedowns successfully over 15 minutes. You have to think if he drops the first round, he's going to get his grappling going. But who's to say he thinks he's up or his corner tells him he's up and he just strikes for 15 minutes, loses a split decision? And credit to you for picking Cub last time out against Dewadu, but I thought that was a complete robbery, one of the more questionable decisions of the year. Cubs kids in the front row in the apex, like with their little headphones on, like I don't know, man. It was a really nice moment, but I was kind of pissed off at the time. As much as I love Cub, but yeah, man. I mean, I don't know. Do you buy into the patterns? Are we talking about Jiri and Pereira with their magic? Are we looking into numerology here on this one? Because it would suggest that Fili probably gets it done. But a fight I'm looking forward to when I'm not 100% decided on. I'm going to keep an eye on the line. Anything over minus 200, I don't want to play Fili. But if maybe the line closes, we get some casual money on Cub because he's not a household name, but he's closer than most. Could definitely see maybe putting a play on Fili, but yeah, it really depends where the line movement goes. We'll spend a little bit more time digging into this one, but a fun fight nonetheless.
All right, and should be more exciting featherweights just before that one. Charles Jourdain, near Pick'em, slightly favored over Jean Silva in this spot. Really interesting matchup here. John Silva coming out of Fighting Nerds camp. Looked good in his last showing, but that was a UFC debut against Weston Wilson. Not going to take too much out of that. He also had a fight booked with William Gomes that was scratched, I think, day of or day before because of a botched weight cut from Gomes. That was an interesting spot, and I remember looking at that matchup, worried about Gomez's volume striking compared to that of Silva, who has more power on the feet. Here against Jourdain, he's fighting, an opponent that's very complete, able to execute with his offensive grappling as needed. Very good in terms of defending takedowns with submissions and things of the sort. But Jean Silva probably won't be grappling, too much from the get-go in this spot. Jourdain not always the fastest starter on the feet, and as he kind of gets his reads, which his stances, I could see him seeding an early lead here against the up-and-coming Silva. Silva's 9-fight win streak, not against the highest level of competition, but we certainly see guys rattle off 9-10 wins against, worse opponents than this. The undefeated Kevin Vallejos in a contender series matchup, that was a good performance for Silva. And certainly I think he could hold his own against top 20, top 25 featherweights, but in this spot, pick 'em odds against Jourdain. Jourdain kind of been a mixed bag in the past couple of years in his performances, but staying more active and fighting high level guys all the time. I think he has more tools to find success in this fight. And again, this is a spot where as we get into round 2, round 3, Jourdain's someone who's known for his high volume. He's somebody I trust to sort of be there in those moments where I'm not entirely sure that's going to be the case from John Silva. We really haven't had him face much adversity in terms of his recent performances. So I'm not going to bet him as only a small underdog. I certainly see that he could find success in this fight, but I prefer my money on Jourdain minus 125 odds.
Yeah, man, this is another tough one, and Jourdain definitely one of those fighters that fits in that bucket of kind of inconsistent. I mean, at his best, he looks amazing. Looks like he should easily be ranked at 145, and at his worst, I mean, he's making just terrible decisions. Um, I mean, we got to go back to maybe the Nathaniel Wood fight for that, or Shane Burgos took him a little while to get going, but really came over late in that one. But yeah, man, Silva, the jury's kind of still out on him. I have liked what I've seen. That Fighting Nerds camp has been awesome. They do a good job setting up game plans. Apparently, they've watched a ton of film, so obviously close to our hearts in the research that we do. But yeah, man, just a tough fight. I do kind of side with Jourdain. I'm with you. I think he's going to be the better grappler, definitely better jiu-jitsu if the fight hits the mat. But Silva's just like mean, and he's kind of wild. And I'm not going to compare him to Jiri. Obviously, totally different weight class. Not really the same thing, but just kind of chaotic in there, which sometimes can be an equalizer. And against the fighter in Jourdain who's inconsistent, that just makes this kind of a volatile spot in general. Another fight where I'll keep an eye on the price. I do agree that if it stays close, though, Jourdain's probably the value side. We've seen him in there against better opponents. He has shown more of a well-rounded game. We know he's going to be there in the third round. Silva, we haven't really seen extended all that frequently over his last few fights. So I'm on the Jourdain side here, but another fight that should be fun, one that's not going to shock me either way. But yeah, again, let's plug the article Saturday with our final picks and predictions because I know I'm up in the air on a few of these this week, and this is definitely one of them.
All right. Wondering if you're decided yet on this next fight, bantamweights, Payton Talbott and Yanis Ghemmouri. Talbot, the minus 1,600 favorite, going up against the plus 800 Ghemmouri. I got to do a little more tape stuff. No, Payton Talbott's the real deal. We saw what he was able to do his most recent performance. It was a striking masterclass, knocking down Cameron Simon multiple times. This guy's for real in terms of his striking. He's very quick to download his opponent's game plan, get his reads, and get right after it. Pinpoint accuracy when it comes to landing from both sides, landing with his knees. Really one of these next generation strikers. And yeah, just perfect in terms of his pull counters, and the ability we see from this kid already at age 25. Certainly promising for what the future holds. There's comparisons to be made, whether it be to a guy like McGregor, supposed to headline, or even the bits and pieces of O'Malley in his striking. I think Ghemmouri is going to have a very tough time standing for any amount of time here with Talbot. As this line indicates, folks are sharp that this kid is the real deal. And it would take him slipping on a banana peel or something here to, I think, drop this fight against Ghemmouri. I've really seen nothing I like out of this man from France. I don't know about you.
Yeah, man. Very easy fight to call. Absolutely insane line. We're looking at like minus 2,500 some books. But get this, DraftKings right now. I don't know if we have a sponsor book at Diamonds. I'd say check there first. But inside the distance for Payton Talbot, minus 190 right now. As of Thursday.
Inside, you said knockout. We were saying inside.
Inside the distance.
Great
Just
bet.
take the inside, and that might be my favorite bet on this card. I can say that with confidence. You could also bet fight not to go the distance minus 220. Use that as a parlay piece. Like, obviously, we're not playing this money line for pretty much anybody ever. Wouldn't recommend putting him in parlays, even though I'm very, very confident he gets the win. But these inside the distance prices on him are just ridiculous here. Ghemmouri, kind of a controversial loss his last time out. He was finished via body kick. It seemed like he didn't speak the same language as the ref, and that was just kind of a weird situation. But they're really setting up Payton Talbot here again. This is supposed to be McGregor card. They're pumping Pyfer. They're pumping Gary. They're pumping these prospects. Payton Talbot is now one of them. UFC giving him a ton of media attention this week. And the other thing to keep in mind here, you mentioned Sean O'Malley, maybe more so even than his style, is going to be his build now. He's going to get these fights that he should very easily win for a little while. O'Malley had a bunch of them before he took on Peter Yan. I mean, he was taking on the ghost of Eddie Wineland. I mean, Chris Rutino from our backyard here in Boston. Just a bunch of guys that they knew he'd look good against. I think after that Cameron Simon fight, which took place in the Apex, they realized what they have with this kid. I mean, he has a crazy social media presence. He's posting videos of game plans for Ghemmouri to follow to make it a more competitive fight. So it's better for the fans. Just really kind of an interesting kid. We could talk about his background forever. I mean, yeah, but regardless, they want to build this kid, and the UFC has their marketing machine behind him, which usually is enough for me to like a side. And like I said, you're getting tremendous value right now on these inside the distance bets. I mean, as soon as you see this, I would start parlaying that and locking it in. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But where are you getting this minus 2,500 favorite against a guy who's just finished by a body kick, a skinny body kick from William Gomez, against a striker like Talbot, who just kind of brutalized another pretty highly regarded up-and-comer in Cam Simon. So I'm all over Talbot here. Don't like the money line, but nobody should really be priced out at the money line just with injury risk. And I don't know. But Talbot's the side here. And we're going to see a few more matchups like this. Probably maybe like an Elkins soon. I don't know. They're going to give him guys that he can just kind of beat up for 3 rounds and look really good against. And then maybe some knockout shots too. But I think Ghemmouri's getting that treatment here. He's a lamb to the slaughter. And I'm on Payton Talbot inside the distance.
Yeah. Couldn't like that bet more. I endorse the inside as well. Let's see it. Another knockout for Talbot. Early prelims kickoff at 6 p.m. The last of those, this women's strawweight matchup between Gillian Robertson and Waterson-Gomez. I mean, at this point in her career, I mean, Michelle Waterson coming off 4 straight losses, still competitive early in these fights, but I really don't see why she is, priced plus 155 in this particular spot. Waterson-Gomez, obviously known for what she's able to do moving forward, landing strikes on the feet in high volume, but particularly in terms of her offensive wrestling. And Gillian Robertson on the other side of things, just surpassing so many stats in terms of women's MMA. In terms of her offensive grappling, what she's able to do on the front of submissions, top control time, there's going to be no path to victory for Waterson-Gomez winning this fight on the mat. It would have to come on the feet. Robertson's improved slightly in that area, but again, we've seen great performances out of Gillian Robertson lately. I always thought of her as one of these mediocre women strawweights, but no, she does have the edge over a lot of these girls when fights hit the mat, and I think that's going to be the case again here. Michelle Waterson-Gomez, not very big, someone I think Robertson's going to be able to outmuscle, as is also the case often in these fights for her at strawweight. So I like Robertson here. I think this is a decent price to player. I'd prefer to bet Talbott inside at -190 than Gillian Robertson at -190, but yeah, I still think Robertson decent play at this number, but not necessarily sure I'll get to the window with her, weighing almost 2-1.
Yeah, man, I'm on Robertson too here. And you're talking about how you used to kind of view her as mid and now you're kind of coming around. I think the big reason for that is that she's down at strawweight now. She was fighting up a weight class, had trouble kind of closing distance against the better strikers in that division, couldn't really find the takedown entries or muscle girls to the ground. But now at 115, she's cutting a lot of weight. Like her face looked sucked out even in media already this week. But at the same time, she now has strength advantage over a lot of women in that division. And Michelle Waterson, as good as she was in her prime, was always small for the division. I mean, if UFC did have an atomweight division, you could easily see her fighting down at 105 pounds. Wouldn't surprise anyone, I don't think. We've seen her taking down against the likes of Luana Pinheiro. I mean, Amanda Lemos completely sliced through her on the mat. And yeah, Waterson's going to be the better striker here, and I just don't really think it necessarily matters. Robertson's striking has improved, not a ton, but she is training at Goatshed, which is kind of like shoot a box Brazil, and that they're constantly sparring. So she'll be sparring against dudes that are just trying to punch her in the face. And even if it's not making her striking better, it's allowing her to kind of get used to getting hit and still close distance and find those entries for takedowns. I think that's going to be the key for her in this matchup. It is women's MMA. I mean, Waterson-Gomez has faced a better competition, but I just have trouble expecting her to keep this fight standing. And on the mat, I think Robertson, one of the best grapplers in the division. And again, we got another 9-year age difference here at one of the smaller weight classes. Certainly tends to favor the more youthful fighter. So I like Robertson here. I will say Waterson-Gomez appears to be in shape. She always looks good, though. I mean, can't really put too much into that. I like Gillian Robertson here to probably win via submission.
Yep, with you on that one. All right. Next, Nick will apologize to our viewers for saying Gary against MVP may be the most boring fight standing, because these heavyweights, Martin Buday facing Andrei Arlovski, cannot expect the most thrilling of matchups here. Buday coming off a terrible loss in his last appearance against Shamil Gaziev, landing no takedowns and getting finished early start of round 2. With seemingly no gas left in the tank. That gives me some concern, seeing him a large favorite here against Andrei Arlovski. Arlovski losing 3 straight entering this matchup, something that he has done previously in his career, but not very often. Obviously at age 45, Arlovski seems like he's fading now, but that's been the case the past half decade. This guy's probably going to keep fighting, win or lose, in this showing here on Saturday. But one would think Buday looks to make some corrections from that most recent performance. If this guy is going to, string together a decent UFC career, he needs to adapt. He needs to find more ways to win fights than what he has relied upon. Although pushing Andrei Arlovski against the cage and, preventing much in terms of offensive striking action is a path to victory that not only would have success for Buday in most fights, but a lot of previous opponents facing Arlovski have found that to be a way to get the win. He's somebody that will oblige a lot of those positions, and he's somebody that really does not throw the highest of volume as well. So, I think it's an interesting fight. If Buday doesn't just smother him, perhaps land an actual takedown, it'll certainly be interesting to see what round 2, round 3 look like. But both guys will probably be huffing for air, throwing what they can on the feet. Arlovski, obviously the better hands, the tighter combinations, slight edge in that department, but he's always been a bit small for heavyweight, and Buday tipping the scales, 265 pounds. I think he's going to be able to push him around the octagon.
Yeah, man, I think you've already talked enough about this one, for being honest. Arlovski, I mean, in his prime was amazing. I remember when he was the top of the heavyweight division, fighting guys like Tim Sylvia. When I was falling in love with the sport, and I mean, he fought Fedor in his prime, and yeah, he's just not that guy anymore. He's 45 years old, not 40, 45, really getting up there in age. And he had a little stretch where he was winning fights, and it was mostly just putting out volume, having relatively decent defense, but he's having trouble now landing that volume because he doesn't really have a speed advantage on many of these guys. If there were a matchup for him to have a speed advantage, I think it could be this one against Buday, who's looked terrible. When this guy came into the UFC, he was kind of touted as a wrestler. We haven't seen that at all from him. I don't think he's averaging less than 0.3 takedowns per 15 minutes. Maybe he's secured one since he's even been in the UFC. I don't know. I would just love for him to try to lean on his grappling here against Arlovski, a guy who really struggles to get off his back. Not the easiest to take down, but I do think that would be the cleaner path to victory. But again, which Arlovski shows up here? He's 45. Is he on all the good steroids from American Top Team? Is he going to look good suddenly, like maybe someone like OSP did a few months ago? And which Buday is going to show up here? We know he's going to look terrible on the scales. Yeah, we don't really know what to expect from him, and it's not like he's ever looked great. It's just this is a fight he should probably win regardless. So I don't know. I think knees in the clinch, up against the cage. Maybe he could find a finish. If not, he's going to land the bigger shots. But will his cardio hold for 15 minutes? I don't know. Will Arlovski's? I don't know. Probably not a fight to get super invested on either side here. Maybe if you could get plus money on it going the distance, like usually heavyweight fights aren't going to the cards. This is one probably juice to go to the cards if I'm guessing. But yeah, I mean, if you need to go get a beer down the street or order a pizza, something like that, this might be the fight to do it.
Yeah, and I was just curious on the total as well. Favored -150 to go the distance. Slight plus money if this fight is to end inside. A lot of Arlovski fights tend to go. This one certainly could as well. Would not surprise to see a decision. In which case, again, Arlovski split decision ticket. Maybe that's one you want to hold. But yeah, not the most compelling of matchups. We'll move on to one I'm very excited for. This flyweight matchup between Tsuruya and Carlos Hernandez. Tsuruya 9-0, another exciting Japanese prospect. Young, just 22 years old. I think there'll be some comparisons to draw to Hernandez's last opponent, Tetsuro Taira, who's now 16-0, just won in a 5-round main event, didn't go the distance, but continuing to impress. And I think while there are some comparisons to be drawn, Taira is much further along than Tsuruya at this point in their career. Tsuruya, more chaotic of a striker. I'd rate his wrestling a bit better than Taira's, but his BJJ is not quite to that elite level. I think I want to see this matchup as these two weigh in and sort of what it looks like as they face off. I think Tsuruya is going to feel a bit undersized here against Hernandez. And yeah, Hernandez in the UFC, both his losses came by finish, but yeah, he's also 2-0. Fights that go to decision, albeit one a technical decision. When he absolutely stuffed takedowns and beat up Dennis Bondar on the mat, I think he could certainly find success like that in the latter half of this fight. So at a plus 360, we're getting on Carlos Hernandez. It's very tempting. I could see myself taking him. Obviously, the issue with a guy like Tsuruya, is wrestling such an X factor, and Hernandez's ability to get up hasn't really been that evident. Not the easiest guy to take down, 65% takedown defense. But that's not great either. And again, if we're going to have a lot of scrambles here at flyweight, I could see him seating his back and, falling into one of Tsuruya's submissions. But apart from that, I think he's very live at this number. And this is another fight that very likely seems to go to the judges' scorecard. So I may be ending up on Hernandez here, one of my bigger underdog plays.
Yeah, the UFC is looking to build this Japanese market. They do have a pretty decent prospect in this kid, Ray. But I'm with you. I don't really think the price is necessarily justified. I was pretty high on Hernandez coming into the UFC. Took him against Altamirano heavy. That was a super competitive fight. But against Nascimento, I mean, he gave his back up, and we do see Hernandez when he's taken down. He does tend to kind of turn away from his opponent, give his back up, which could prove troublesome for him here. I think Tsuruya, if I'm even pronouncing that correctly, his path is likely via submission if he's going to justify this price tag. That being said, I don't know that he's going to. I mean, Hernandez definitely a dog. I mean, he had that war with Dennis Bondar, really fun fight. Shows he could go 15 minutes, push a ridiculous pace. We're going to see a lot of scrambling here. Ray's cardio has held up, but I mean, if it's 15 minutes of a grinding pace, a little bit yet to be proven at this level. So I don't fault you at all for taking the dog shot. Currently, where I sit, I do think Tsuruya is the rightful favorite, but I think the price is so off that I'm a little bit considering the opposite side just off that alone. But it does seem like this is another one of these kids they want to build. I don't really think the UFC marketing machine's getting behind Carlos Hernandez anytime soon. Yeah, they're really trying to build out this Japanese market. Maybe this kid's a piece of that plan. So I guess we got to wait and see. But fun fight on paper, certainly one that I think is mispriced by most books.
Yeah, and again, it's with a lot of this continuing to steam. Tsuruya now minus 525. I mean, Tetsuro Taira was minus 600 at close, and you know we're approaching that territory again. Comparing their skills, I don't think he's quite there. But yeah, it should be a very exciting fight at flyweight and the card opener at bantamweight. Ricky Simón, minus 245 favorite here facing Vinicius Oliveira. What are your thoughts on this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, I faded Oliveira last time out against Sopaj. I thought Sopaj would be the better wrestler. I mean, a lot of people are saying the same things this week. Ricky Simone's just like a way better Sopaj. Like, Oliveira lost that first round convincingly, couldn't really get off his back. In the striking exchanges, he was explosive. His cardio held up well. He's shown he's durable with a ton of power. I just think stylistically, this is just a really tough matchup. Simone, yes, he's regressing a little bit, coming off losses to Yadong and Batista. But this is a major, major step down, in my opinion. Still averaging nearly 5.5 takedowns per 15 minutes. I don't think Oliveira is going to be able to work his way back to his feet with any sort of consistency. So outside of Simon being very stupid and just kind of exchanging in the pocket like he did against Uriah Faber, we've seen it other times in his career, not the highest fight IQ. But I think coming off 2 losses, you can't really play those games. I think he's just going to get the takedowns here until he either finds a submission, wins via ground and pound, or just grinds out the decision. I just think this is too much, too soon for Oliveira, who I do like a lot as a prospect. But yeah, I just didn't think that Sopaj fight was as dominant as that 10-second highlight you see of that KO. I mean, he was losing pretty bad, especially on the mat. And Simone's still one of the better grapplers in the division. He did fade a little bit against Jourdain, but that was a 5-round fight. I think over 3 rounds, he's going to have the better cardio. Just checks enough boxes for me to like him here at this price. I think he's fine as a favorite and probably a parlay piece for me.
Yeah, I'll be starting my night with Ricky Simón as well. A lot of the points you touched on, I can continue to highlight. Oliveira conceded 3 of 4 takedown attempts in that fight against Sopaj. And yeah, that's going to be the path for Ricky Simón. His higher level wrestling should figure to get the job done. He's coming off consecutive losses in his last 2 fights, but they are against top 15 bantamweights in, Mario Bautista and Song Yadong. And yeah, it's also worth mentioning that fight that Sopaj took against Oliveira came on very short notice. He stepped in, he gave a good, 7-8 minutes before Oliveira really started to take over there in round 3. So yeah, it won't be as competitive on the feet here in this fight because I don't think we'll spend long on the feet. It's going to be Simón looking for the takedown early, and I think he's going to have no problem controlling Oliveira when this fight hits the mat. Seems appropriately lined, the 245 favorite. So, as always, UFC 303, this International Fight Week card should be a good one. Thank you for all tuning in and watching our breakdown of the event, and be sure to check out Dine Sports this Saturday morning for our final predictions on each of these fights. Nick, as always, thank you for joining me. Sign us off.
Yeah, take care, everyone. Good luck, and check out that article Saturday morning.